Oh, thank you, Siri. Um, I started with Informix in 1991 in frontline support in Menlo Park, and loved Menlo Park, loved the Bay Area. Worked my way up through support and wanted to go into development, which at the time was in Portland, Oregon. So I moved myself and my wife and daughter to Portland and was there for about 3 years and worked on the kernel. Coming from advanced support, what we mostly knew was how to twiddle bits on the disk level to force systems to come online that were being reluctant. And so we got to know a lot of the kernel structures and a lot of the kernel code. So the kernel was the obvious place for me to start in development. And I've really kind of been there ever since. I'm now technically the chief architect, but I know the kernel a lot better than I know a lot of other layers. And I'm not really a client guy. So if you have questions that are about Java clients or ODBC or things like that, I'm not the best person to go to, but I do know the engine and mostly the kernel. Um, was in Portland for a little while, then moved uh, an enlarged family back to Massachusetts, where I'm from, and was in Boston for about 20 years working from home um, in Informix development. And now I'm actually in New York City because I have 3 adult daughters, all of whom were already in New York, and I can work from home. So when my wife retired from her library job on the South Shore of Boston, we moved to New York, and we've been very happy here. It's really great. I liken it to the first year of college to try to figure out what among all the fun options you have every day you want to do. That's how first year of college felt like to me. So I recently gave this talk in Florida at the IBM Tech Exchange, and Rhonda was there and asked me if I would be willing to do the talk for WAG, and I was happy to do that. So here we are. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, everybody's going to be able to see a text window. We'll do a little test here. So here are my slides. That's probably going to be easy for everyone to see. And this, I'm hoping you can all see this font in this window here. If it's too small, even in full screen mode, let me know and I can make it bigger, but we're going to try with this for now. So Informix 15, unlimited and future proof. That's quite a claim. It's probably going a little beyond reality, but I'll do my best to convince you that it is relatively unlimited and future proof. Here's what I'm going to talk about: the new infrastructure, which kind of makes all this possible. What the changes mean for you. Um, there are obviously larger row and page addresses, and the scale of what we can support now for capacity. Um, and and I will be going into the weeds a little bit. I'm guessing that most of you will not blanch at any of this, but we'll see. There are some new capabilities and performance updates that I'll talk about. We're about to release version 15.01. It's our first mod release. We've been doing bug fix releases up to now, but we've got some features coming your way this month, and we've kind of tentatively scheduled a 15.02 for early next year. Hopefully Q1. We'll see if we make it. So we refer to the disk structures that were current in version 14 and earlier as the version 0 infrastructure. And the native infrastructure in version 15 we refer to as the version 1 or V1 infrastructure. There's there are several important changes that happen here. Obviously, we went to an 8-byte timestamp, which allows us to use incremental archives now a lot more easily. I don't know if you probably noticed that if you've tried to use incremental archives lately, most of the time when you try to use them, they say, sorry, but you're going to have to do a level 0. I don't know if they explain why, but the reason is because the 4-byte timestamp that we have used up to now has advanced too far. So an incremental archive for this DB space or for this system or whatever is not possible. You'll have to take a level 0. It's the speed with which we burn through values in the 4-byte timestamp these days, even with fixes that have attempted to slow it down a little bit, is such that incremental archives are basically useless and have been for 10 years. But in version 15, they're back, and they can significantly reduce the size of your archive. So I'm hoping people will start using them again. We now have new page headers, which I'm going to show you in some detail here. And we use a 10-byte physical address, so chunks can be quite large now. On Linux, the maximum size of a chunk used to be 2 terabytes, and now it's in the exabyte range. 8 exabytes basically is as large as you can write to a file with the current version of LSeq. The number of chunks was limited by a signed short, and I just made that short unsigned while I was in there. I figured, what the heck? So where the maximum number of chunks used to be 32K, now it's 64K minus 1. We need a -1 chunk value in there to recognize, an invalid chunk or an uninitialized value. So it's 64K minus 1 is the max number you can get. And the big challenge we had was going from a 4-byte row ID to an 8-byte row ID. We support both, as you all probably know, but we now support what are called large tables that use 8-byte row IDs, which have a slightly different format from the one you're used to. And I'll show you that. And because the new row ID allowed for about 64,000 slots per page, it made sense for us to have larger page sizes, and that had been requested anyway, and they're faster. So we went to a maximum of 256K for a page size. It takes a lot of overhead to have 32K, 34K, 36K to support all those page sizes between 16K and 256. So I just used powers of 2, and so we still support all the old page sizes you're used to up to 16K, but then we go to 32, 64, 128, and 256. I'm hoping that that granularity will work for everyone. We could have the architecture allows for bigger page size, but there's a fair amount of overhead internally if you go to like 1 megabyte pages, and a 256K page allowed for an index key on the largest row size that we had at the time, which was 32K. So that's why I went with 256. If in future we need larger pages, the architecture will definitely allow that. So as I said, what the version 1 infrastructure means partly is that incremental archives are practical and desirable again. New chunks can grow up to 8 exabytes, and even migrated chunks, DB space chunks, SB space chunks can't be extended. Blob space chunks can't be extended, but DB space chunks can, as you know, can be extended. And as soon as you migrate to V15 and you go to native mode, those existing chunks can grow to the maximum size. A chunk can support a mix of page headers and page types and all that. Not different page sizes, but you can have the new page header and the old page header commingling in an existing chunk, so that's no issue. So hopefully the total capacity of an instance, the maximum capacity of an instance, is something you'll never have to think about again. It's just, it blows your mind. So not a worry, hopefully. And these large tables could be 134 million times larger than the maximum table. Previously, I'm talking about a single fragment here. Obviously, you could fragment tables to allow more rows to be stored in a single SQL level table, but now fragmenting for the purposes of avoiding the out of extents issue or out of pages issue is no longer necessary as long as you use large tables, which is the default in V15. You can always create legacy style tables that use 4-byte row IDs, no problem. And in fact, I guess 4J is doing that, but large tables will allow you to not have to worry about running out of extents or pages. And so the maximum number of slots that we can support on a page is actually higher than we can fit on a 256K page. I think the practical limit for max slots on a page is in the 30,000 range, somewhere around 30,000 slots. If you have like a 1-character schema, which nobody would have, but that's all we can fit onto a 256K page, but the architecture will allow for 64,000 if we ever go to a larger page. And maximum rows per table, again, single fragment table is now 2 billion times the previous max. So hopefully we will all be long retired and maybe even have shuffled off our mortal coils before any of this gets to be too small.
One quick question that came up in
Yes.
chat that I think is relevant is what is the limit for number of partitions within a table on version 15?
Number of partitions within a DB space, maybe? Is that the question?
Well, no, this is a fragmenting a table.
Same as always. I
Okay.
don't know what the limit is, but that has not changed. And so that brings up a point, which is that I didn't change the partition number or fragment ID format, which means that the same number of partitions that we have supported in a DB space is that we have the same number in V15 as earlier versions. I just didn't see a need to allow for millions and millions of tables per DB space. I didn't think anybody really cared about that. So I didn't change the part num format, frag ID format, the same thing. So I'm going to switch now to my text window and show you a couple of things. I've got hang on. So I'm using the latest code here that like I said, we're about to release. And you can see that OnStat is showing me I'm using infrastructure version 0. This is in compatibility mode. This is what you will see right after migrating from any earlier version to version 15. We don't immediately go to native mode. And the reason is because in native mode, we are writing new style page headers. Anytime we write a new page, we're going to use a new style page header that V14 and V12 and all that don't have any idea what to do with. And we don't keep track of where we're writing these pages. So to revert once that happens is kind of impossible. And that's just one example of structures on disk that we are writing new versions of. So, we can revert reserve pages and partition header pages because we know exactly where those are. There's a limited number of them. So during conversion to V15, we will convert partition header pages and the reserve pages and chunk free list pages and things like that. And because those are revertible, fairly easily revertible. While you're in this compatibility mode, you can, in theory, you can test your application and make sure everything's working. If things aren't working at that point, you probably want to consider reversion. So that was the philosophy behind it, at least. You can't use many of the new features in V15. You can't use larger page sizes. You can't use create larger chunks than 2 terabytes. You can't create large tables. For instance, I'll show you here. I'll try to create a giant chunk. I have an 11 terabyte file system here. That's as big as I could get. And let's say 256 for page size. So I'm in compatibility mode. That's not going to work. Page size, blah, not supported, etc. And create database JC is the existing one. Create large table JC tab, all one int. That's not going to work either because infrastructure v1 features have not been enabled yet. So there's a downside to staying in compatibility mode, but I could, if I wanted to revert from here, I could. Going to native mode is a matter of, you could do it a couple of ways. I'll do it by taking, you really should take an archive. That was our feeling. You should take a level 0 archive. And the new trick is the -iv1 there. So I don't know if you can see this, but in my log, it says version 1 infrastructure has been enabled. If I say donstat dash, I see I'm infrastructure version 1, no longer compatibility mode. If I try to create this giant DB space again, it should work. So there's this giant chunk. It doesn't look so impressive because this is in units of DB space page size, not base page size. But that's, you can see the page size is 256K there, and that's, what is that? Let's see, 46 million of those pages. I can now create a large table. And the page size doesn't matter. All that you're saying when you're creating a large or a small table is you're affecting the format of the row ID that we're going to use there. So you can create them in 2K pages. You can create them in 256. Up to you. I can also create a small table there in the same DB space. So let's take a look at these guys. Uncheck PT, JC, JC large. You can see that PT is showing me tablespace uses large row IDs. If you think you've created a large table and you want to make sure, then that's the obvious way to do it. There are other ways, but that's one of the easiest ways. As I said, once you're in native mode, the default is large. So if I say db access JC, create table default, all one int, uncheck PT JC default. As you can see, by default, tables are large, but I could set a configuration parameter to change that default. I certainly tried to give you full control over this. If you don't want to use large tables, that's fine. But if you use small tables and you run out of extents, then you're kind of stuck again. There's unfortunately, no way to alter in place or even in a slow way to alter a table from small to large. You have to create a new table to get the new row ID format. So I'll show you that format. Let's see. Show you the old one first. So this is the row ID format you're used to. Only makes sense in hex. This being the slot number and everything else being the logical page number. It's being expressed here as an 8-byte value, but only 4 of these 8 bytes could be used in a small table. So that should be kind of familiar. I forget whether I inserted a row into my large table. Insert into JC large. Do this too. So as you can see, the format here is a little different. Now we've got 2 bytes for the slot number. So that's how many rows we can fit on a page in theory. As I said, the practical limit now is 30,000, but this would allow for about 64,000. And then everything else, except for this sign bit, is room for logical page number. So you can have trillions of pages in a partition now. We need to set this sign bit for large row IDs in order to distinguish them. If we don't set that bit, there's nothing really distinguishing this guy from this guy. This could be, slot 1 in page hex 100 in the old format. So we need to be able to distinguish them using that sign bit. The unfortunate side effect of that is that if you select row IDs not in hex, they look really ugly. Like these row IDs are sort of bite-sized and friendly looking, although you can get negative row IDs in a small table, no problem. You just need to insert more than 8 million rows. But anytime you select row ID and decimal from a large table, it's going to look just this bad. It'll work. I can say select star from JC large where row ID equals that, and it will work. But visually, it's not so great. Let's take a look at. Do you have a question coming in?
Yeah, a comment from 4J is that Gennaro handles this fine, but if you've got legacy 4GL applications, if they've referenced row ID, it's going to break because the standard 4GL does not handle the larger type. So just remember that you're going to have to manually or probably adjust your code to be able to support it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about clients now. Older clients don't have any idea what a large row ID is about. So you can connect to a v15 instance no problem with an older client, but it cannot access large tables. It'll get a friendly error if it tries to. It won't crash or anything, but that's not going to fly. So recompiling applications with the latest v15 libraries on the client side is pretty important if you want to get the new features. And we do have a version of 4GL that's available download that understands all these v15 structures now. I don't think that was true until late spring or maybe summer, but that is out there now. So 4GL does understand large ROIDs, the latest version of 4GL. So you can see here in the PT that page size is 256. The part num, again, that format is the same. And let's take a look at this page. Whoops. We'll just print out the first data page. And hopefully you can see this. This is a little different looking than it is in V14. For any older page, it'll be a little different. We're printing more information and in a slightly different order. So here's the address. We've got more, we make more room here for giant addresses. We provide the size of the page. The mode indicates whether this is a new page header or an old page header. Probably can be mostly ignored. There's the page flags. It's the data page. The interpretation, that's same as always. Number of slots, checksum. You can see that even with this 32K rows on this page, we've got almost 200K left on the page. And we print the page ending timestamp here. That stamp is not in the header, but we print it here for convenience. And you can see that, well, I didn't show you a page from before I went to native mode, but anyway, you can see that this is now using more than just the 4 bytes. And we have the page version. Can't think of anything else that's we do, let's see. I will show you one thing. In order to support all these slots on the page, we needed a larger slot table entry. We needed an 8-byte slot table entry. So I will do this. Dump out this page. And I can never remember what 256K is really. But that's it. And okay. So our header now is our original header used to be just 24 bytes, and now it is 32 bytes. So this is the header now, and the body of the page starts here. This is the page ending timestamp. This is on Linux, so it's byte swapped. That the timestamp used to be this guy, and then this was the entry for slot table 1. This is now all timestamp. And now this is slot 1. This is the entry for slot 1. That is new, and we had to increase that size in order to support the larger page sizes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to have a byte offset value in here that was going to work for the larger sizes. That was really the reason we were limited to 16K pages before, was this 4-byte slot table entry. As soon as you go higher than 16K, that 4-byte entry doesn't work. So any questions on any of that? Because the page address now is 10 bytes, we've got 2 bytes for the chunk number still. That hasn't changed, but we now have 8 full bytes for the page offset, and that on disk, that's going to be in base pages always. No matter what the DB space page size is, the address on disk is going to be in base pages. But we now can address more pages than LSeq can handle. LSeq takes an 8 byte integer, assigned, I think it's assigned 8 byte integer. And until LSeq is upgraded to take a 16 byte integer for the byte offset, um, our architecture is going to be ahead of the Linux architecture. So right now, I think 8 exabytes is as big as any chunk can get, but that can go higher if we ever get a 16-byte LSeq. So, as I said, the maximum table size or fragment size, single fragment table size has been bumped up by 134 million times. Um, and the maximum chunk size was 4 terabytes on Linux. It was 8 terabytes on AIX and Windows. But anyway, it's now 8 exabytes across the board. And you don't even want to think about the max storage. I guess it used to be 140 petabytes. It's now half a yottabyte. I didn't even know what a yottabyte was until I tried to figure out how big the capacity was. 4.2 million times the previous max size of an instance. And to put that in perspective, that's 4 times the half a yottabyte is 4 times the estimated size of the internet currently. I mean, this was true last year. Maybe the internet has grown since then, but so anything you guys want to see from this part of the talk. The next part of the talk is going to be about some features that are coming up that we're releasing with 15.01 and eventually with 15.02. But just as far as differences between 12 and 14 and v15, if you have any more questions on that, I could potentially demo it for you or answer them, depending upon how awake everyone is. All right,
We're
I'll
awake.
just
No, nobody has put anything in chat about it.
That's fine.
Folks may at the end come back and have some other thoughts.
Yep.
Obviously, if there's anything that you're really excited about, by all means.
Well, I've shown you page sizes, I've shown you timestamps, I've shown you large chunks, um, and large tables. I think I've shown everything I can think to show you for now. So let's talk about what's coming up.
One quickie, John.
Yes.
Just there's a second problem with older compiled executables besides the row ID, and that's the SQL ERRD in SQL CA.
Yeah, well, I mean, older clients should get the old array. Currently, newer clients will get an array that's 8 bytes each, but they were 4 bytes before. And an older client, we can tell when we're talking to an older client. We should format SQLCA so that array is 4 bytes apiece.
Right, but those executables would have to be static linked, or they're going to use the v15 libraries.
Yeah,
It may not work.
Yeah, that's true. If you're mixing and matching there, that's probably not a good idea in general. Would anybody do that across major versions, though? I hope not.
You might have, I mean, third-party apps that are running on another machine.
Mm.
It may just mean that some legacy parts, or again,
Right.
as precompiled like that, you just have to consider those as needing static version of CSDK and
Yeah.
having it separate.
Right. But we've got clients, especially 4GL clients, that have apps that they don't have source for. So
Yeah.
recompiling is not an option.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But keep in mind also, just flagging for anyone that doesn't know, you can have multiple versions of CSDK installed on a system as long as they are in separate directories. So you could change the Informix dir and potentially need to change the LD library path to point to the legacy copy of CSDK if you're using the 15 on for general running.
I think this is a big part of the testing process when people are considering migrating to V15 is
Yeah.
getting their applications in order. It is more work. I'm sorry about that, but it's just it was kind of an inevitable consequence of going to a new row ID. Okay,
I,
so go ahead.
one other thing for legacy applications, I genuinely haven't tested this, but I've seen a couple of clients with it. If somebody is version locked on a really old system, like I've seen a couple that are still locked on like ADODB, will it completely break if it's coming from like a CSDK2 edition, or or will it still work just as it did on 14?
I can't say that I've tested that. I mean, I don't know if anybody's tested that, but in theory, it should work just as well as talking to 14.
Okay. And again, that would obviously be non-supported.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a good idea. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly which versions of the clients are supported and which ones aren't, but it doesn't sound like a great idea. Okay, so uh, we have this feature. We've actually had this feature for a little while in V14, but it was not really announced. It's called external smart blobs. It's a different kind of smart blob space that allows you to store the actual large objects in a file system, and you can't mix and match. They're either in the file system in this space or you're using a normal smart blob space. You can decide to split them up between several different directories and a bunch of different subdirectories, and so it doesn't all have to go in one directory or anything. There's some flexibility there, but all the metadata is stored in the smart blob space. All the large object data is stored in individual files in the file system. So every separate large object is a separate file. The reason that we did this feature was because Deezer was, they had a customer that was using a lot of smart blobs and their archives were taking forever. And they wanted to have more, they wanted to be able to archive the large object data themselves in their own time and have the Informix archives go a lot faster. So that's why we implemented this feature, and we did this in 1410 FC8 maybe or 10, and it's been in V15 all along. But anyway, now we're announcing it in 1501. I guess actually this might have been announced in 15, but the announcement is relatively new, so you may not have heard of it. It does potentially reduce the number of Informix chunks because, as you know, it's a pain in the neck, but smart blob chunks can't be extended. The structure of them makes that tricky. It doesn't make it impossible. We're working on that, but we punted initially when we did storage provisioning and chunk extension. We still don't have a release that allows you to extend smart blob chunks, so people tend to create a bunch of those chunks as they run out of space, and it's usually the user space that they're running out of. So this kind of helps reduce the number of Informix chunks, and if you have thousands of Informix chunks, that's pretty unwieldy. We do allow for 64,000 now, but when I was testing that, it was obvious that more than a couple thousand chunks was probably not something you'd want to do. It works, but it's really unwieldy. You might be able to use compression at the file system level, where that wouldn't probably work with an Informix chunk. I hope you wouldn't compress an Informix chunk under the covers, because that would really slow things down. But you now have the possibility of compressing this large object data as long as we don't notice the compression. That would work. And I think there are people who are storing these things in a file system and archiving them themselves and getting rid of older ones, because if you select the large object from Informix, we'll just return it. If we don't find that file, we'll just return a null. So it's a relatively friendly error. And so they'll remove them, and if they think they need them, they'll bring them back from their own archive. The big downside here is that because we don't log this large object data, so we can't replicate it. We can't do native Informix replication with this data. So you're in charge of backing them up and for replicating them if you've got a grid. We are working on native replication for these guys, though. It's not, I wouldn't say it's coming soon, but we are working on it, because I think that a lot more people would use this feature if we gave them native replication for these large objects in the file system. Your file system would have to be, the directory structure would have to be kind of identical across the different machines, but that's not so big a deal. So.
A quick question on the external smart blobs.
Yeah.
Are there any limitations with the XCompat data blade with them?
I don't know. XCompat data blade. I've worked with time series, BTS, and a couple of other blades, but I haven't directly tried these with that blade.
Okay.
XCompat is the only way to get the size of a smart blob.
Okay. I don't know. I'll write that down, though, as a question to ask. Maybe I can get back to you on that.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, we use it extensively.
Okay. Any other questions on external smart blobs? As some of you may know, if you're running on a modern Linux box with Informix, we don't support direct I/O on very typical devices these days that are using 4K block size and sector sizes, at least in version 14 and 15.0.0.0. In 15.01, which, as I said, it should be coming out this month, we now support direct I/O on 4K or 2K or 1K or 512 byte devices on Linux. It's not really an issue on AIX as far as I know. It's really just been an issue on Linux. And so you can create a chunk on a 4K device on Linux, but we will have to downshift to AIO, and that, if the page size in the chunk doesn't, our page size doesn't match the sector size well, that performance can be horrible. The performance now, if you use a 4K page size or any multiple of that on a 4K device with direct I/O, the performance is really great. So your checkpoint flush times are going to be a lot shorter and all that. Along with that, we have parallel checkpoint flushing. Now, that's actually not the greatest name. When we do a checkpoint, we have to gather all the dirty pages in the various buffer pools and then do the flushing. And we've always done the flushing somewhat in parallel, although the flushing phase is improved in 15.01. What's really improved, though, is the dirty page gathering among all the different buffer pools because of different page sizes. So if you have an instance that has a bunch of different page sizes, we used to just gather those pages one buffer pool at a time in series. And now we will do that page gathering in parallel. And even the flushing is more in parallel than it used to be. So that won't really affect your block time for non-blocking checkpoints, but the flush time for non-blocking checkpoints should be significantly reduced by this guy and this guy if you're on Linux and you have 4K devices. We've also coded parallel shared memory dumping. We know that getting a shared memory dump with a modern instance that uses a lot of shared memory is anathema. If it's going to take, 15 minutes to dump all that memory, it's just not going to happen. So now you're able to set dumpter to a comma separated list of directories, hopefully that are on separate IO channels, and we will dump shared memory in parallel to those directories. And then there's a way to knit those separate files together to make a dump that we can look at with onstat and all that. But for the purposes of the user, hopefully that they have the opportunity to get much faster shared memory dumps if necessary. This is all coming in 1501. And by the way, this feature is going to be in 1410 FC13, which is also due this month. These guys are 15.0 only, but this guy is going to be in 14 and 15. Now, we wanted to increase the max row size from 32K to 2 gigabytes in 1501. We did not make it, but we're expecting to do that in 1502. As I said, the tentative schedule for that is early next year, hopefully Q1, but maybe Q2, we'll see. But your max row size is going to go from 32K to 2 gig. That's not going to include a huge column type. Like there won't be a char 1 meg or anything. We're not planning on that. But we do want to increase the size of the row type and the overall row size. Those two things are very much in the works. This is more like a bug fix, but currently when you create an external smart blob space, we sort of in a brain dead fashion will create user data space. We'll allocate user data space for it as we do for normal DB spaces. We're going to fix that and make sure that external smart blob spaces don't bother to allocate any user space. You can go out of your way to make sure there's no user space, but by default, that should be the case. So that's coming. And as I said, we're working on native replication of external large objects. That's not coming in 1502, but possibly end of next year. I think that's all I've got. So I'm going to put my slides down and we go back here and see if there's any more chat stuff. Thank you for the thumbs up. I see all these messages in chat. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, okay. So it looks like we've covered all this then. Are there any other questions people want to ask? Feel free to unmute and do that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I don't give you the mirror effect.
So I actually have a couple. One of which is, so everyone knows, what would the FC equivalent be of the 1501?
1501. It's a feature release. So it would be like, well, I mean, originally it would be like I mean,
Karen told me the answer to this earlier. I just
we used to do UCs and then we used to do UDs long ago. It's not a major release, obviously, but it's like a release that does conversion reversion. If you can picture like 1410 FC 6. If you were 1410 FC6 contained a lot of new features and had conversion reversion in it, and I think FC4 did as well. It's sort of like one of those. There is conversion and conversion reversion code enabled and active when you go from 15.0.0 to 15.01. You will get conversion.
So why I'm mentioning it is I was told from someone else with HCL that the 1501 is the equivalent because of the other releases of what like 14.1 FC3 would be. And I mention this because a lot of companies wait till either the third or fourth release before upgrading to a whole new version. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean we obviously had a lot of bugs to fix in the spring. Um, the 15.0, I think the latest, the 15.0.0 release is 2.3. That has a lot of fixes in it. I think it's a pretty good release. We are now adding more features, so that's more opportunity for new defects. So I wouldn't say that this 15.01 is going to be more stable than 15.0.0.2.3, but it contains all the fixes that guy does. So I think it's more. I think where did we do the first conversion reversion release of 14? I think it might have been FC4. So I feel like I've forgotten though. But 50, FC3 or 4 for in the 14 family is probably about the equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah, and the big point of that is for anyone listening, that is looking at the upgrade process. It is now, been out for over a year, and it is now you're not going to be beta testing it if you are not that the initial release was beta testing, but it's now a more mature product than the absolute first release.
There were so many huge changes in the first release. We understood that people were going to shy away from it, and it was we had a lot of bugs to fix in the spring and the summer. Those bugs are fixed. We still have more to fix, but the critical ones certainly have been fixed. 2.3 I think is a pretty good version, and O1 should be also pretty good. So if you again though, if you're going to upgrade from 14 or 12 to 15, you're even with the 15.01 release, you're going to go to compatibility mode, and then you're going to have to switch to native mode. It's going to look the same, but but also if you go from 15.0.0 to this new release, you're going to get conversion reversion. So
I think Karen's point was that I think Karen's point was that the dot one, the .0.1 release was like stability wise equivalent to the FC3 release in 14.
Yeah,
It
could be.
it was kind of the first real stable version, or will be. But as
So
you say,
you're
dot 2.3, you're feeling is stable anyway. But
I think that is more like, assuming FC3 was a stability release, I would refer to 2.3 as that. O1 contains new features, so and as far as we know, they're good. But anything new you're putting in has potential for problems. So I wouldn't say this is more stable than 2.3, but it should be close.
all right, thank you.
And for anyone that doesn't know JC, this is why you can tell he's technical and not on the small side,
Yeah.
because being very honest and upfront with this process and not trying to sugarcoat things.
With the first version of 11.50, I don't know if any of you were around for that, but that had all this brand new replication stuff in it that is now ubiquitous and now everybody loves and depends on. But it was brand new then. And I was with some salespeople in a meeting with a customer and basically told the customer, no, you don't want to go to this release. And I thought they might want to, the sales guy was going to strangle me, but it was green. That code was green at that point, and I come from support. I was not going to send this customer straight to that totally green code. I knew the features were going to be great eventually, but we had some work to do on them. And the 15.0.0.0 release was pretty green, but I also knew I felt comfortable that customers were not going to jump right to it, especially since, as we said earlier in the call, people are still trying to get we're still trying to get people to go to 14, and 14 is a great release. People are just really comfortable on 12 and even 1170. So I wasn't worried that everybody's going to rush to this very first version. We had a lot of work to do this year to clean things up, and we've done that. So I'm happy with it now.
And I'll also, just in case anyone wasn't on the very beginning, reminder that version 12 does go end of support in April. So if you want support for 12, you're going to be paying significantly more for it after that point. So now really is a good time to look at the upgrade.
Thanks for the plug.
It honestly, it's just making sure people are not surprised by it.
Yeah.
So I do have another question for you. This is one I genuinely don't know the answer to. Traditionally, it is considered best practice to resolve in-place alters before an upgrade. Is that something that is an absolute must going 14 to 15, or is it still just
Yeah.
best practice?
Yeah, it's an absolute must now. Yep. It wasn't it was not really that important going from 12 to 14 or from 11 to 70 to 12 or whatever. It wasn't that critical. If you did in place alters in the new version and you wanted to revert, then you had to resolve those. That was mandatory. But it wasn't mandatory that you resolve them before doing the upgrade. In the case of V15, unfortunately, it's mandatory. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
prior to
what?
15, prior to 15, if you didn't fix your IPAs before upgrading and you had to revert, it just made and you use some new features altering after that, then you're all fixing the alters going backwards would have been
Mhm.
really slow, really take a long time. So it was a thing you should do. Now
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
mandatory.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of art. Again, if anyone is watching this and you haven't had to deal with it, there are all kinds of articles on how to identify and do the fixing in place alters. So just be aware of it, that it, as you're looking at it. Um, One other thing I'm going to throw to you to plug, because especially mentioning the going from small tables to large or otherwise, do you want to do a quick plug on loopback replication for that?
Yeah, as I said, you can't do an alter table to move a small table to a large table. I thought about it a lot and I just couldn't figure out how to make it work. So that's not currently available. I don't know if it's going to be available in the future. Uh, the best thing that we've found for now, if you want to in an online fashion, relatively online fashion, move a legacy table to large row IDs is to use local loopback replication. You can um, you can create a large table that's with the same schema and locally replicate it, uh, getting all the rows into the new table, and then you do have to have a very short downtime where you change the names of the tables so that the application doesn't have to be changed. So I wouldn't say it's completely online. There is a window where you have to change the name. But aside from that, it should be relatively online. It should perform decently. And that's the best way that we found, the best method that we found for moving from small to large at the moment.
Appreciate it. Does anyone have any other questions? I haven't seen anything else pop up in the chat. So, all right. So really, really appreciate it. This
Sure.
is very useful for hopefully everybody on here. If you're not playing with 15, start the process. I mean, 14 is going to be supported for a long time, but at this point, is 14 considered feature stable, or is there going to still
Yeah.
be?
We're not planning to put any more features in 14 now.
So 14 is just going to be bug fixes, but it'll be for quite a while. But it's worth looking at 15 because I found so many people that aren't expecting it that suddenly run into a limitation, with things like number of pages per table, or things you don't expect, that starting the process now rather than when your data is starting to get close to a limit is always worthwhile.
And hopefully it's fun. It's fun to play with. If you've been using Informix for a long time, you're used to certain limitations, and getting rid of those limitations is pretty fun. So give it a shot.
So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Gonna go ahead and stop recording on this one. So we'll split these into 3 separate recordings.